Wilmington, March 31st, 1993. A young actor is about to achieve his breakthrough. He was supposed to get married in 2 weeks. The cameras are rolling. A revolver fires from 5 meters away. Doctors working over Brandon Lee's body fight for his life for 6 hours. In vain. Bruce Lee's son dies at 28 years old because of a weapon everyone believed was safe. But what's even more shocking, this didn't happen just once, and not twice either. When the crew wants to save money on safety, actors pay for it with their lives. When an actor signs a contract for an action film, he's aware of 3 things. There will be stuntmen, there will be explosions, and there will be guns. But what's definitely not in the contract is the question, real or prop gun? And this difference lies between life and death. America's film industry chose a different path than Europe. In Hungary, Germany, France, the law is clear. Under no circumstances can a live round exit a prop gun. These are modified in a way that's practically impossible to reverse. The barrel is blocked. The mechanism is modified. Safe. But America thinks differently. Here they can use real weapons too, provided they have blank rounds in them. A blank round contains gunpowder, a primer, a casing, everything needed for an explosion. But the projectile is missing, theoretically. And it's precisely this word theoretically that costs lives. Because when you need to save money, when days count, when the producer says you need to move faster, then safety will be the first thing they cross. They don't set aside more days for checking weapons. You don't hire an armorer if there's someone on the crew who has a valid gun license. And this is the point where everything starts to fall apart. Let's return to 1993, Wilmington. The filming of The Crow is underway. Brandon Lee plays Eric Draven, the rock musician who returns from death to take revenge. The filming is going great. 8 days left. Lee knows exactly that this film will be his breakthrough. They won't just mention him as Bruce Lee's son anymore, but in his own right, with his own talent. The scene is simple. Lee walks into an apartment. On the other side stands Michael Massey, who plays the character Funboy. Massey holds a .44 caliber revolver. In the scene, Funboy has to shoot at Lee's character from about 5 meters away. The crew didn't buy a special prop gun designed for filming. Instead, they converted a real firearm. Earlier, for another scene where they filmed a close-up of the weapon, they had to load the magazine with rounds that looked real, because the camera would be so close that it would show if the magazine was empty. So someone took live ammunition, removed the gunpowder and primer, but left the projectile and casing. This way it looked like a real round, but theoretically was harmless. The problem started when nobody properly checked what remained in the weapon after the previous scene. A projectile got stuck in the barrel. Nobody noticed. Then, when the time came for the fatal scene, the gun was loaded with a blank. The blank contains gunpowder, contains a primer, and creates an explosion. But it shouldn't shoot anything, except when a projectile is already waiting in the barrel. Massey pulls the trigger. The force of the explosion shoots out the projectile. 5 meters means nothing. The bullet buries itself in Brandon Lee's abdomen and stops next to his spine. The crew first thinks Lee is just overacting. Then they realize this isn't acting. At 1 o'clock in the morning, he reaches the hospital. They operate on him for 6 hours. At 1:03 in the afternoon, he dies. After the tragedy, everyone faces a decision. Do they stop filming and let Brandon Lee's last film remain unfinished? Or do they continue and build him a memorial by finishing what he started? The choice is difficult, but the crew decides to continue. Lee's stuntman, Chad Stahelski, takes over some of the missing scenes. With special effects, facial motion software, they add Lee's face to the footage. This is revolutionary new technology in 1993. The Crow will be the first film to complete a dead actor's scenes this way. The film comes to theaters in 1994. It will be successful. It will become a cult film. But everyone knows this isn't just a film. It's a memorial to a young man who died when every opportunity was in his hands. Michael Massey, who pulled the trigger, can never get over it. He doesn't take a role for a year. Years later, in an interview, he says he still has nightmares. He never watched the film. He dies in 2016 at 64 years old. He carries the trauma to the very end. But Brandon Lee's case isn't the first, and unfortunately, not the last either. In 1984, 26-year-old actor John Eric Hexum is bored during the filming of a television series, Cover Up. There's a long break between takes. On the set lies a prop revolver with a blank in it. Hexum picks up the gun. He jokes with the crew. He plays Russian roulette. He holds the gun to his head. He pulls the trigger. No projectile comes out of the blank. But the explosion itself, the air pressure is so strong that it fractures Hexum's skull. Bone fragments penetrate his brain. 6 days later, they turn off the machines. This case shows that even a blank isn't harmless. If a gun is held directly near a body, the air pressure from the explosion can be sufficient to cause serious, even fatal injury. Hexum didn't know this. The crew didn't explain it to him, and in an instant, everything was over. Now let's jump forward almost 30 years. October 21st, 2021. New Mexico, Bonanza Creek Ranch. The filming of The Western Rust is underway. Alec Baldwin is the lead actor and also the producer. The film tells a Western story about lost souls, bandits, and death. During the day, they're preparing to film a rehearsal of a scene. Baldwin's character has to hold a revolver. Dave Halls, assistant director, takes the gun from armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed and gives it to Baldwin. Meanwhile, he shouts, "Cold gun." This is film slang for the gun being safe, no live ammunition in it. Except there was live ammunition in it. Baldwin in the scene points the gun at the camera. Helena Hutchins, 42-year-old cinematographer, stands directly behind the camera. Director Joel Souza beside her. The gun fires. The projectile passes through Hutchins's body and stops in Souza. Hutchins is transported to the hospital by helicopter. She can no longer be saved. Souza survives. After the tragedy, it emerges that serious safety violations occurred on the Rust set. Gutierrez Reed was a 24-year-old armorer for whom this was one of her first major productions. Previously, colleagues had complained about assistant director Dave Halls that he ignores basic gun safety, that he doesn't follow protocol, that he rushes people when you should never rush a weapons professional. During the investigation, it also emerges that in the days before filming, several crew members left the production due to safety concerns. They complained that the workdays were too long, rest time too short, and the handling of weapons unsatisfactory. Nobody listened to them. According to Baldwin, he never pulled the trigger. The gun went off by itself. However, the FBI investigation clearly showed that the gun doesn't fire by itself. Someone had to pull the trigger. During the trial, armorer Gutierrez Reed is found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Hannah Gutierrez Reed receives an 18-month prison sentence. Charges are also filed against Baldwin, but the trial takes place in July, and the judge ultimately dismisses the charges due to procedural errors. But the question isn't who gets convicted and who doesn't. The question is how live ammunition could get onto a film set. How could someone give a loaded pistol into an actor's hand with a cold gun signal? And why didn't the basic check happen that should be done every single time someone picks up a weapon on a set? At the root of the problem stands one thing: money. Every film shoot works with a budget, and the budget is always tight. Producers say that gun safety protocol takes too much time. Hiring an armorer is too expensive. It'll be enough if someone on the crew pays attention. Someone who understands guns. Someone who has a license. But an armorer doesn't just need a gun license. They need to know the dynamics of film shoots. They need to know when and how to check weapons. They need to know the different types of ammunition. They need to be able to stop filming if something isn't right. And they need to have the courage to say to the director and producer, "No, this isn't safe. This can't be the prop department's job. It can't be the first assistant director's job. And it especially can't be the actor's job to check whether the weapon handed to them is safe." In Hungary, the rules are clear. When a weapon is brought to a set, the company that rents it is required to hold safety training. They must show the crew how the weapon works. They must show what distance must be maintained. They must show where it's allowed and not allowed to point. And everyone must try the weapon so the rental company can verify that everyone understands what they're doing. This is time. This is money. But it saves lives. In America, however, the situation is different. Here, the gun industry is huge. Many people have guns at home. Many go to shooting ranges. So they think everyone understands them. And this is the point where tragedy begins. Because knowing how to fire a gun at a range isn't the same as knowing how to safely handle a gun on a film set, where hundreds of people are nearby, where cameras and lighting limit visibility, and where actors behave threateningly according to their role. After the Rust tragedy, several major Hollywood actors stood up and said, "Enough." Dwayne Johnson directly announced that in all his future productions, where he's the producer or lead actor, it will be forbidden to use real guns. Only replicas, rubber guns, or airsoft guns that can't fire will be allowed. The muzzle flash, smoke, primer flash will be added later, with visual effects. This is more expensive. This means more work for the post-production team, but it's safe. Director Rupert Sanders, who made the new version of The Crow in August 2024, made it clear from day one, real guns will be forbidden on set. Only airsoft replicas, rubber and metal imitations. Nothing can be shot with them. And although this increased the budget, Sanders said safety is worth every penny. But not every director thinks this way. Not every producer is willing to spend more on safety. And as long as this is the case, tragedies will repeat. After Brandon Lee's death, they tightened the rules. At every shoot where guns are used, an armorer must be present. Every gun must be checked before it's handed to the actor. It's mandatory to announce to the crew what type of weapon is being used in the scene. And it's mandatory to ensure nobody stands directly in the gun's line, except when absolutely necessary for the scene. But these rules only exist on paper if nobody follows them. On the Rust set, every rule existed, but assistant director Dave Halls ignored them multiple times. He didn't announce to the crew that a gun was being used. He didn't check what was in the gun. He didn't wait for the armorer to check. He just grabbed it and gave it to Baldwin, saying, "Cold gun." And this is the point where rules become meaningless. Because if one person decides to cross them and nobody stops them, then it doesn't matter how many rules there are. The solution isn't more rules. The solution is that productions are willing to dedicate time and money to safety, that crew members dare to speak up when something isn't right, and that those who bear responsibility take that responsibility seriously. Michael Massey never wanted to talk about what happened on the Crow set. For years, he was in complete silence. Then once, in an interview, he just said, "I don't think I'll ever get over this." Massey, 12 years after Brandon Lee's death, said he still has nightmares. He was unable to watch the film. He was unable to accept that he pulled the trigger, even though he wasn't at fault. He thought there was a blank in the gun. He thought it was safe. Yet he was the one holding the weapon when Brandon Lee died. This trauma accompanied him through his life, and not just him. Every crew member who was there that day carries that image. Producer Jeff Most, 31 years later, still has difficulty talking about it. He says it's one of the worst things that ever happened to him. Brandon was his friend, a brilliant artist, a fantastic person. And in an instant, he was gone. When the Rust tragedy happened, Jeff Most said his nightmare returned because he also knew Halyna Hutchins, and his heart broke again. This is the chain of trauma. This is what filming accidents leave behind, not just the dead, but those who survive, who were there, who couldn't do anything. The question is whether Hollywood is capable of learning from the past. 30 years passed after Brandon Lee's death, and yet it happened again. Halyna Hutchins died the same way as Lee, because of a weapon they thought was safe. A few producers, a few directors, a few actors changed their own practice, but the system didn't change. They still use real weapons. They still save on armorers. They still rush the crew to move faster. The solution would be simple. Complete ban on real weapons. Only replicas, only airsoft, only visual effects. But this costs money, and Hollywood saves where it can, until something happens again. And then everyone again says this was the last time, that now we really have to change, that we can't allow this to repeat. But the past shows it always repeats. Before filming Rust, several crew members signaled there were problems. Work days too long, rest time too short, gun handling inadequate. Some even left the shoot. They reported their concerns in writing. Nobody listened to them. Filming continued, and a few days later, Halyna Hutchins died. This isn't an isolated case. Prop maker and pyrotechnician Maggie Gohl, already in 2019, filed a complaint against assistant director Dave Halls. She said he consistently ignores gun safety rules, doesn't announce when a gun is used, questions whether safety meetings are even necessary. In one case, he asked her to continue working while a pyrotechnician needed medical attention. Gohl reported the case to Blumhouse Productions producers. She also notified the Directors Guild of America. To her knowledge, nothing happened. And 2 years later, Dave Halls was the one who said the words "cold gun" while handing a pistol loaded with live ammunition into Alec Baldwin's hand. This is one of Hollywood's biggest problems. Crew members see the danger. They signal it. But the hierarchy is such that leaders don't listen to them. The director rushes the crew. The producer rushes the director. Investors rush the producer. And everyone says, "Just do it and don't complain," until someone dies. And then everyone says, "But why didn't anyone speak up?" They did speak up. Nobody just heard. Brandon Lee's wedding was planned for April 17th, 2 weeks after his death. The invitations were already sent. Eliza Hutton, his fiancée, had already chosen her dress. The venue was ready. Lee knew that The Crow would be his breakthrough. He told friends this film would fulfill all his dreams. And meanwhile, while he talked about his great future, A projectile waited in the gun barrel. Nobody knew it was there. Nobody checked. And when the moment came, it was too late. Sophia Sheenus, Lee's co-star, told that Lee refused to wear a bulletproof vest. He said, "I'm not worried. If my time has come to go, then it's time to go home." Maybe Lee felt something wasn't right. Maybe not. But that doesn't change the fact. Because of a banal error that could have been prevented by a simple check, Brandon Lee died at 28 years old. Chad Stahelski, who was Lee's stuntman, later became the director of the John Wick series, a film series where the protagonist is essentially immortal, where thousands of bullets impact around him, but he always survives. Stahelski said on the John Wick films, everything was different. Every rule was followed. Nobody got a real gun. Safety was more important than anything else, because Stahelski was there. He saw what happens when a gun isn't properly checked, and he determined that under no circumstances would he ever repeat this. But how many more are there in Hollywood who weren't there? Who didn't see? Who think it won't happen to them? And how much longer until it happens again?